You are listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rafa, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004. Today, we're in Limoges.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
And joining us again, Dan Hackenberg from Algemeen Dagblad in Holland.
Check.
Hello, Dan.
Good afternoon.
You were regular at the Giro d'Italia. It's great to have you back again.
Thank you. Thank you as well.
And you're going to be bringing us a bit of Dutch insight today because there was a good Dutch story today. But where are we, Lionel?
Well, we're in Limoges. The sun is out. We've come 237 kilometres south, the long way round. We had to drive 380 kilometres today to get down to Limoges. But the sun's out. This is the French capital of porcelain. The porcelain industry is based here, so if we need any pots and plates to take home or just sit in the boot of the car and gradually get smashed on their way to Paris, this is the place to get them.
Perfect. Limoges is a famous site. It has quite a lot of cycling links, Limoges, and we'll talk maybe about them in part 3. We've got, in tonight's episode, we've got interviews with Brian Holm, Patrick Lefevere, both of the Etixx-Quick Step team, Dan McClay, who's had 3 top 10s already in this Tour de France. We've got the Free Boss file is back after missing a night last night. We've got Sam Bennett, who's battling through and is currently sits second last in the race, and lots more besides. Before we get on to any of that, Lionel, can you give us the tale of the etape, please?
I can indeed, yes. Stage 4 from Saumur to Limoges, 237.5 kilometres. Fairly straightforward day again, wasn't it? 4-man break, Alexis Gouget of AG2R, Marcel Kittel of Trek Segafredo, Oliver Nason of I Am Cycling, and Andreas Schillinger of Bora Argon 18. They were the breakaway. The gap never really got much more than 6 minutes. In fact, I don't think it got over 6 minutes, but they were away a long time. The lead was coming down, though, and as one of the riders got dropped, it was Gouget who got dropped, Irizar, Schillinger and Nason carried on. They were away till quite close to the end, inside the final 10 kilometres, and then we had the sprint finish we were all anticipating. Tricky uphill one, and if anything, it was even closer than yesterday. Marcel Kittel of Etixx-Quick Step got it, his first stage win of this tour after missing last year, of course, and the 9th of his career. Friend of the podcast, Brian Coquard of Direct Energie, was second. He was closing in, though, and a lot of people are saying that perhaps a win for him is not too far away. He was second, Peter Sagan third, and Sagan is still in yellow. He's also leading the points competition, but Mark Cavendish will wear green tomorrow. I think it's a 5-point lead for Sagan in the points competition at the moment. Jasper Stuyven is in the polka dots. Julien Alaphilippe is in white. Tomorrow's 5th stage, another long one, hilly as well, goes to Lille-Oran. It's 216 kilometres into the Massif Central. Tricky finish.
Massif Central's premier ski resort, isn't it? It
is, Lille-Oran. And in the last 40 kilometres, there are 4 climbs, second or third category. So tough old finish tomorrow.
Tough old finish tomorrow, but today was also quite a tough finish. And I don't think we suggested last night that it would be too tough for Kittel. Well, someone is suggesting on Twitter that we did suggest that. Perhaps said that it wasn't perfect for Kittel, and I don't think it was perfect for Kittel, but he won despite that.
Well, even Brian Holm, the Etixx-Quick Step manager or sports director, said after the finish that they did think it might be too heavy for him, meaning
or him too heavy for it,
but they got everything perfect. And I mean, we can go into a bit more detail about how Etixx-Quick Step have really turned it around after a weekend where it didn't really go their way.
It was a phenomenal finish. Cavendish wasn't there. He kind of lost position, faded a bit, and it ended up in a real battle between Kittel and Coquard, and very, very close. They bounced off each other. It was a little and large lunge to the line, wasn't it? Kittel's a giant, Coquard's a little wiry, fast sprinter. It looked like an unfair battle, and there was a little collision which maybe cost Coquard more than it cost Kittel.
Well, what we saw today actually is Kittel back in top form. You know, and Kittel in top form can do these sort of sprints, even the heavy sprints. He did it in the Giro, he did it in a couple of years ago, he did it in the Tour de France a couple of years ago. So everybody who doubted, Kittel is back on winning ways and winning ways in the Tour de France, and he likes winning, but he likes winning more in the Tour de France.
I think you were there at the finish line, Dan, because you asked Kittel in the press conference afterwards about his reaction. We saw him spread-eagled on the ground. It took a lot out of him, didn't it?
Well, you saw just a bunch of people. I was wondering who's in the middle, you know? And that was Marcel Kittel, the cameras, journalists, soigneurs. Everybody was just gathering, a group of 30, 40 people, and just in the middle, Kittel was just watching the ground, the asphalt, and waiting. And he said, well, this is the worst that could happen, just waiting.
He didn't know if he won it.
No, he was just waiting for his name. He said, that's the worst moment maybe of today. And then it could even get worse, he said, if you don't hear your name. So after that, he was just, delighted.
Well, you and I spoke to a couple of people at Etixx, didn't we, Lionel? Let's hear first from Brian Holm, sports director at Etixx-Quick Step, and then immediately after that, Patrick Lefevere, the avuncular or grumpy. He's one or the other, isn't he? He tends to be. He's been grumpy the last couple of days. Avuncular today. He's been very critical of the team, openly, publicly, but he was very happy today. So let's hear first from Brian Holm and then from Patrick Lefevere.
You've seen Mark Cavendish win 2 in 3 days, and now Marcel Kittel's won for your team. The pressure must be easing a little.
Of course, I mean, it doesn't really matter if Cav, Greipel or Christoph is winning, you know, beaten is beaten, you know, second is second. It was pretty close the first day. Yesterday we really sort of screw it, you know, the lead out to blame. The good thing was yesterday Marcel said he got diamond legs, you know, and he could have won yesterday, he said. So sort of believe in him, and on the paper it's looking a bit too heavy for Marcel today, but luckily, it was too hard for the others also. Just the little French Coquard was looking quite strong in the final. It was a good kick he made, but happily not good enough.
It was very close again, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's nice, especially when you're winning.
What do you make of Coquard? Because he's been there or thereabouts a lot, but he's never come that close.
That was close one, and he's going to win his stage. You know, it's going to happen, you know, sooner or later. I'm not too worried. He's young, he'll be there.
And you said today you thought maybe a little bit heavy for Marcel, so presumably he has got very good legs. He's just a bit unlucky yesterday?
Well, you cannot say it's unlucky. We simply just screwed it. The lead out didn't work for us. They came from behind the wave, you know, he was boxed in, and there was absolutely zero sprint for him, so that's life.
You've spoken about mistakes being made other days. Happy that no mistakes were made today, and was that the difference in the finish today?
Well, that's the problem. Every day is different, and the first day we were on the left side of the road in the wind, and probably maybe we were too sure of ourselves, and we blew it up. And then the other sprint yesterday, we did a lot of mistakes. We pulled at 7, and then Tony Martin did 2 or 3 lead outs, and it went wrong from first moment to the last moment. But today they did it perfect.
Did the team know that, or did they have to be told that?
Yeah, but yesterday evening we had a debriefing. It's very important. We looked the video all together, and we were pointing to the riders. This was wrong, this was wrong. You should do it different. And Marcel took the word as last and said, "Listen, my confidence in you is intact. So trust me, I'm gonna win. I don't know when, but I'm gonna win. And I don't want you to pull as first team. I prefer to come out to the second line, especially today, with the downhill, fast downhill. It went well."
Now, obviously, the main story was Marcel Kittel back on top.
No doubt.
But if you're Dutch, maybe a different story, because some footage was released later. Somebody had studied the sprint, and it was, as we said, it was a drag. Yeah. It was a serious drag up to the line. And young Dylan Groenewegen, the Dutch champion who rides for Lotto Jumbo, he went really early. He came from really far back, and he was sprinting. I counted for 37 seconds flat out of the saddle the whole time. He was surfing from one wheel to another. He briefly got a lead out, but he rode brilliantly, and he was obviously very strong, and he finished 4th. It was a phenomenal performance.
It was a crazy performance, I guess. The funny thing is, yesterday he became 10th, and this guy, he's only in for winning. He doesn't bother. It's his first Tour de France. Yesterday, his first top 10 spot. After 50 minutes, after the finish, he forgot about it. it was no longer there. He was already thinking about the next day. And he tried it 2 times. On the first day he became 23rd, I guess, 10th on the third day. And you think like he was maybe a bit disappointed, but his self-esteem was still high after yesterday. And he said, literally, I guess me and Marcel Kittel have the fastest sprint over here. And that's a 23-year-old guy on his first Tour de France.
He was over the last 600 meters. He was the fastest guy.
Yeah.
It shows you, doesn't it? Well, sprinting is that there's so much more to sprinting than just being fast. I mean, Kittel opened up his sprint about 17 seconds. Coquard went even later than that, and almost timed it perfectly. You know, in a straight line, Kittel would probably beat Coquard by a length or so, but Coquard almost beat him by timing it just right. Yeah. And you know, Groenewegen, if he'd been in the right place, perhaps would have won that. Yeah,
that's what he said already yesterday. You just have to hope for him, out of his point of view, that he will be there on the first rows one day. You know, that he will be delivered perfectly, and then he can just catch up with the best guys, and then we can see what he's able to. Because, of course, this is a 4th place, but if you look at the video again, you say there was only a sprint of actually 2, maybe 3 guys, and after that there's a slightly gap. So it's a 4th place, and he should be pleased about it. But probably he already forgets about it. He just wants also the win over here.
What can you tell us about him? You were saying earlier that there's an interesting story about his grandfather.
Well, his grandfather, he's really of a cyclist family. His grandfather and his father run a bike shop in Amsterdam. He's an Amsterdam guy. His grandfather was, and still is, I guess, he makes bikes like kaders or frames. He's so sad, one of the best in Holland. Dylan Groenewegen.
Hang on a second.
No, this is terrible.
You're saying his name a little bit different to my pronunciation there.
We'll come again. Dylan Groenewegen. He used to work at the bike shop himself as well. He quits his high school to do more training. I heard a funny story about him. His father is really dedicated as well. He's riding the scooter like in January, in February, in March.
Motor pacing.
Yeah, motor pacing like all times. And his trainer Marijn Seeman said in February, I guess, it was the week before Kuurne, and he said, well, you have to do some motor pace training again. And Dylan answered, well, how are you going to do it? My father is in Turkey for a week of holiday, you know. So I've got no one to ride a scooter. So Marijn Seeman had to get over to Amsterdam, wearing his winter sport clothes, get on the scooter, and do the motor pacing by himself. But it shows some dedication of the team as well. They really trust the guy, and yeah, it's just a question. He got, I think, 6 or 7 wins already this year, but there might be a big one coming up.
Just before we let you go, Dan, you've got to file some words for the newspaper. The Dutch were the big story of the Giro, weren't they? Tom Dumoulin, Steven Kruijswijk. Big stories all the way through the 3 weeks. What are the big stories from the Dutch perspective here at the Tour?
Well, we haven't seen them so far, and it's just guessing if we will see them over here this year. Of course, Tom Dumoulin is over here as well, and Tom Dumoulin will never ride for nothing. You know, he's of course the big main goal in the team is Warren Barguil, but don't underestimate Tom Dumoulin. He will pick his days, and I think even the GC is not out of his head. We got Bauke Mollema. Well, I guess he will. If nothing happens, he will be in the top 10.
I thought you were going to say that you might see Bauke Mollema, or you might not, because he does tend to ride a la Zubeldia, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he rides a bit like, you know, these computer games when chickens are picking up grains. You know, it's a bit like that. I like it actually. And you know this about Bauke Mollema. He's one of the biggest readers.
We were talking about that.
Of the peloton.
So he's known as Book Mollema.
Yeah, it's Book Mollema actually.
He's an ambassador for Dutch Reading Week or something, isn't he?
No, I don't know actually, but he writes. He reads crazy books like Piketty, you know, Capital in the 21st Century. He finished it last year on the second rest day, you know.
No, we're aware of this. There were 1 or 2 readers in the peloton. We might be following up on that for Kilometre Zero. Watch this space.
Yeah.
In the meantime, what's that very evocative theme tune that I'm hearing?
afternoon, chaps. Good to be back for our regular rendezvous. Glad you sorted the music out. Glad you caved to my outrageous demand for that. Makes me think that I can make a few more outrageous demands and you might cave to those as well. So I'll have a good think about that. Missed you yesterday, unfortunately. Busy day, revolved around Mark Cavendish again. His second stage win, very different today in Limoges. He really got boxed in at the finish and came over the line not very happy at all. Something didn't quite work out in his lead-out train, and was not in any mood to celebrate, unlike Marcel Kittel, who really took a big weight off his shoulders by winning. I had a good chat with Patrick Lefevere, the Etixx-Quick Step manager at the finish, who came out the other day with the quote of the Tour so far, probably the least politically correct quote of the Tour so far, but nonetheless. To some German colleagues, they asked him whether it was time after stage one for Marcel Kittel to start panicking. He replied, "No, we will never panic. Panic is the reason that you lost the war." So there you go. That was Patrick Lefevere a few days ago. Today he was in much better mood. He explained that the team had really dissected what had gone wrong yesterday in the hotel. They wound the tape back to the 7 kilometres to go mark, and they watched the film over and over again, and they identified a series of mistakes that they weren't going to make again, and they duly corrected those errors today, and it was a pretty fine lead out from Etixx-QuickStep. It was interesting last night being in Etixx-QuickStep's hotel with dimension data. Of course, Cavendish won yesterday and he rode for Etixx-QuickStep yesterday. Obviously, he's still got a lot of friends on that team. Brian Holm, his long-serving director sportive, no longer with him, but Brian Holm is working for Etixx-QuickStep, so he was there to congratulate Cavendish last night. I think the congratulations from a few other members of the Etixx-QuickStep staff weren't quite as enthusiastic as Brian Holm's congratulations, but the dimension data contingent were obviously absolutely thrilled. They allowed themselves a couple of beers, I think, in the bar. Roger Hammond, Rolf Aldag, the management team there that has done such a good job with Cavendish, and you just talking to them over the past couple of days, they've been so grateful really for what British Cycling have done with Cavendish over the last few months. I mean, the credit really needs to be shared evenly between Dimension Data and British Cycling, because Dimension Data have given Cavendish the latitude, the freedom to go off and spend a lot of time on the track and really benefit from all the structure and all of the technology and all of the know-how that British Cycling have. British Cycling have done a great job. It seems that way anyway. I mean, even today, Cavendish, he got boxed in. He got caught in the washing machine, so to speak, at the end, but his form is certainly very good. Interesting tidbit from the hotel last night. A lot of people have talked about Cavendish's fitness and maybe even his weight being better at this Tour de France. He's actually 2 kilos heavier than he was this time last year, and he's 5 kilos heavier than he was at Team Sky a few years ago. He's put on quite a lot of muscle mass. He's been doing a lot of work in the gym, quite a lot of squats, I think, and it seems to have worked. So that was today. 2-1 now in the battle between Cavendish and Kittel, the German Übermensch, as Brian Holm calls him. Going to be a rematch in Montauban in a couple of days, so we look forward to that. In other news, I did manage to see Lionel today. I saw Richard as well, so I did the Grand Slam really of cycling podcasters, and we did hope that we were going to get together tonight somewhere near the Zone Technique or the press room in Limoges. Didn't manage to, but I'm sure we will arrange something over the next couple of days, and I'm glad to see you're enjoying yourselves in the meantime in my absence, chaps. You don't seem to be missing me at all with all the fantastic guests you've been having on. Bit disappointed that Chiro hasn't been on yet, but I'm sure you'll sort that out soon enough. Good evening, guys.
Eurosport, the home of cycling.
And now, Pedaler de Charme.
Thank you very much to Eurosport for sponsoring our daily Pedaler de Charme. We've kind of forgot to put the shout out on Twitter today for Pedaler de Charme, partly because we had such a long drive, 380 kilometres, so we got to the finish in here in Limoges quite late. But I am going to nominate Pedaler de Charme for today. I'm going to nominate Marcel Kittel, who was in the breakaway all day. He's a veteran of the Trek team, a Basque rider, a very unusual Basque rider because he's a ruler and a time trialist rather than a small climber. And he's a great guy. He featured in our Basque Country special in the autumn. He's known as Radio Basque because he literally doesn't shut up. He talks all the time. So I look forward to going and presenting him with a Peddler de Charme t-shirt tomorrow morning. Well done, Marcel.
Excellent. Yeah, just before we introduce our next special guest this evening, when we watched Dylan Groenewegen coming through and picking his way up so far back, all the way nearly to the front, it did remind me of Dan McLay's performance in the Grand Prix de Nan in northern France, a one-day race, 1.1 ranked UCI one-day race, I think it was, and some footage emerged on social media. An overhead shot of McLay picking his way.
It's unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable.
Well, on that, and before we introduce our next guest, I spoke to Dan McLay this morning at the stage start, and I asked him about that, and he said, no, that's not what I like. I'd rather have a clear line to the finish line rather than, negotiating all these bodies. It's just something he happens to be quite good at, but obviously if he could have a clear line, all the better. Now, he rode fantastically today, 7th, 3 top 10s he's had so far in his debut tour, which is an amazing strike rate, and he was right up there today. And I spoke to him at the finish. Here is Dan McLay. 7th on the stage, Dan. Terrific performance. Spoke to you this morning, obviously, but talk us through that finish there.
Yeah, we came over this little climb uncategorised towards the end, and they went quite hard, but it was quite a nice climb, so it was, everyone passed okay. And then it was a fast run in. I actually had a really good place with a couple of Ks to go. Perhaps actually a bit too far forward, because then I was kind of right on the wheels, waiting to try and leave it a bit late. But in the end I just sort of hesitated too much and stalled myself there really, and then it was just always getting back up to speed after stopping pedalling and stuff like that. But it's all experience, and today was a bit better than the other days, so still.
You're improving every day, and is it a case of sort of gaining a bit of experience every day, learning how these finishes go?
I think so. I think it's a bit of experience for me, and with the guys that are helping, and it'll get better every day. So,
what kind of support did you have today? Were you on your own?
No, I had Flo and Pierre-Luc looking after me, but then after the last climb I was a bit by myself, but that was a bit the nature of the descent. Seeing Cav there looking for his lead out guys, and quite a lot of guys, a bit by themselves, lost today just because of the nature of the finish. So
there was a lot of road furniture, a lot of funneling, chicanes and so on. Were any hairy moments for you?
Sometimes when it's like that, it's not as bad, because you're always just going around the corner, or sometimes it's worse when it's dead straight, or when it's a bit slower, whereas where it's fast and you're going downhill, you aren't too close to each other because everyone's trying to keep their speed. So.
It was quite a drag up to the finish, about 700 metres long, and quite difficult. Is that the sort of finish that you like?
I don't mind it. It's just about getting a clear run on all of the finishes, to be honest. I don't think it's enough of a difficulty to say any sprinter doesn't like it or does like it or not. When you come in with that sort of speed, it doesn't turn into a different type of rider's finish. It's still a sprint.
You had a perfect view there of Kittel, Greipel, Sagan. Cavendish was behind you, so not such a good view of him today. But how far are you away from those guys? Do you see them and realise what you have to do to get there? I
feel sprint-wise I'm on a similar level, but I think positioning and stuff. You don't know head until you go head to head, so it's hard to say. I don't think there's a vast difference, but I think a lot of people are close. I think there's a lot of guys leading out those guys who are nearly as fast. So
Yeah, 3 top 10s for McLay, riding for Fortuneo-Vital Concept, a British rider in a French team. Maybe a win is on the cards for him, perhaps not this year, but at some point in the future. Certainly people will be taking note of Dan McLay's performances.
Absolutely. We heard the Freeboss file, the latest Freeboss files before the break there, and he mentioned the demands that he's been making. He's got his own theme tune now. I'm a bit worried he's going to get a bit carried away, because right at the end there he did mention that we are yet on this year's Tour de France, most unusually, to be joined by Ciro Scognamiglio of Gazzetta dello Sport, our old pal, and look who it is. It's none other than Ciro.
So, listeners, the tour has really started today, certainly not before my presence in the podcast. This is the really first day of the tour.
I heard earlier we were chatting at the finish, and a rival podcast asked you if you'd be interested in appearing on their Ciro, and I was very encouraged by your response. No.
Exactly, Richard, because I was already thinking about a question to do to our listeners. So, I mean, 2 questions, as a matter of fact. 2 questions, because I'm hearing a lot of colleagues, a lot of people ask me, but what about Aru and Nibali? What can we do? What can they do in this Tour de France? Is better Aru or is better Nibali? But, listeners, this is not important, not at all. So the real question is, and I would like also to know your opinion are better sea and beaches of Sicily, hometown, region town of Vincenzo Nibali, or are better beaches and sea of Sardinia, our region home of Fabio Aru?
So do you have an opinion on this, Ciro?
Yes, I have a clear opinion of this, and I'm sorry for the shark, but the sea and beaches of Sardinia are better.
What is Fabio Aru's nickname?
Yes, he normally should have this nickname, the Cavaliers of 4 Moors, but I don't know the exact word.
It doesn't trip off the tongue, does it?
Yes, exactly. You know, it's something that belongs to the flag of Sardinia. There are 4 men with a band on their eyes, and so he's considered the Cavalier of Sardinia. In a certain way. If you remember when he won the Vuelta last year, on the podium ceremony of the last days, he took with him the Italian flag, but also the Sardinian flag.
So, a Sardinian versus a Sicilian. Are there any Italians in the Tour de France this year?
Well, good question, Lionel. Well, I'm still Italian, I think, because you know that I consider myself more important than riders. But no, I mean, as a matter of fact, the problem is that Italy has 2 important guys for DGC. It's difficult now to know how far they can arrive. On the other hand, there are few Italians in this tour, 13, and they don't have a lot of possibilities to win stages, in my opinion, because the majority of them, they are helpers of captain. For example, Caruso for BMC for Van Gardner, Sabatini for Marcel Kittel, Guarnieri for Christophe, Tossato for Contador. And so, I mean, for a stage, I think we also have to hope as Italians in Nibali or Aru.
And I've seen you a few times, Ciro, shadowing Nibali. We're always quite close to Nibali when he's not riding a stage. Any insights into how relations are in that Astana team? The race hasn't really started yet, but how are Nibali and Aru getting along? How are relations in the team? Do they eat together at night? I presume they're not rooming together, so how are they getting on?
No, not rooming together. As a matter of fact, the roommate of Fabio is Luis Leon Sachens, the Spaniard guide, and Nibali has no teammates, roommates for the moment in this Tour de France. It's alone. Well, for the moment, their relationship is normal. We have to consider that our life is ending in this moment. Listen.
Yeah, we do, almost. No. Very good. Our French colleagues, as they left the press room there, had a good old laugh at us podcasting here by the poubelles, by the bins, and there seems to be a sort of loading bay area, and there's a lorry reversing. It almost hit Ciro.
So, listeners, we risk our life for you. This is the truth of this afternoon. But concerning their relationships, I mean, for the moment it's normal. But I mean, if they will have the same level in mountains, well, I'm not sure that they could continue in this way. Let's wait and see.
And Ciro, I think you had another question or something else to put to the listeners?
It's not really a question, listeners, but it's a kind of feeling that I have and I want to share with you, because after the Tour de France, unfortunately, another week of work for me, but later, in the first day of August, in first days, from the 1st of August till the 6th, I will be in Naples. Listeners, every one of you, if by chance you are in Naples for holidays or for any reason, I will be really glad to offer a real Napolitan pizza to you. So, Why not? Certainly you have to be in Naples. I don't know if any of you will be, but why not?
What an offer. Ciro, given that your event in London sold out so quickly, you could be inundated, and off he goes. He's just sprinted away. Someone's ran after him. Is that doping control? Or does it look like a doping control chaperone? But Ciro ran off, and an official-looking person just ran after him and put his hand on his shoulder.
Extraordinary stuff. I mean, it's almost as if he didn't have to do the 250-mile drive today, isn't it?
Anyway, remarkable offer there by Ciro. If any of the listeners of the podcast happen to be in Naples in the first week in August, go and claim your pizza from Ciro. And Ciro, don't send your receipts to us.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rafa. Whoever you are, wherever you ride, whatever the reason, Rafa exists to improve your ride. With the finest kit, inspiring stories, and vibrant clubhouses and communities all over the world. See rafa.cc for more information.
Thank you again to Rafa, who are sponsoring us at the Tour de France. Very grateful to them, and I mention it every night, but if you go to the Rafa site, rafa.cc, More Than a Race, or if you look for hashtag More Than a Race on Twitter, you'll find stories every day related to the tour and things around the tour. The latest today is a sort of history of sunglasses at the tour, shades of style, and going back through the years at the shades that leading riders have worn. And it's actually a more interesting history than you might think. You know, if you think back to Coppi and on to Bernardino and his famous Ray-Bans, which he broke at the 1985 Tour de France when he fell off. And it was really just after that specialist cycling sunglasses came along. I think Greg LeMond was the first to wear special, Oakleys that were designed for cycling.
Yeah, certainly, the likes of Greg LeMond, Andy Hampsten, Phil Anderson. Hampsten and Anderson wore those great big Oakley
massive
factory
ones,
pilots.
which are
and
kind of back in fashion.
They are. They remade them, didn't they, Oakley?
If you're a hipster.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention a couple of things, Lionel. Marcel Kittel obviously won today. He's back on top. We released our second Kilometre Zero, sponsored by Niederberg Wines. We're very grateful to them as well. They're sponsoring our Kilometre Zero series. That's a short episode that comes out every morning. And it's a sort of featurey style left field look at some aspect of the race. We've got one on sports directors coming up tomorrow. We've done a day in the life of a journalist, and the one today is on German cycling and the rebirth of German cycling after a decade of darkness, really. It's coming blinking into light, and Kittel sort of symbolises that.
Couldn't have timed it better, could we? We released that this morning, and then Marcel Kittel wins a stage for Germany this afternoon.
Got an interview with Kittel in there where he talks about he and Deckengalb were instrumental in getting German television back to the Tour de France to cover it. He talks about the meetings that they had where they were asked about whether they were doping or not and how they could persuade them that they were clean. And it's very interesting to hear a guy like Kittel in the position he's in doing that. I just wanted to talk as well a little bit about where we are, Limoges, because this is a place with a bit of cycling history, obviously. I think one of the last times we were here, we had dinner in Pascal Hervé's restaurant. Former Festina rider has a restaurant here. And going a little bit further back to 1995, this is where Lance Armstrong won a very famous stage 3 days after the death of his teammate Fabio Casartelli. He got away in a big move that went quite late in the race and attacked with a long way to go, about 20 kilometres to go. He attacked this big group and won on his own. Very emotional win. I mean, when we think of Lance Armstrong, we think of him as the once 7-time winner, notorious doping cheat. I did a chapter on that in my book, Etap, and I interviewed Armstrong about that win, and there's no doubt watching it that it was a win on emotion. Whatever Armstrong was on for some of his wins, this was a win on emotion, and it was a very emotional victory. And everybody who watched it will remember when he won alone and stared at the sky and pointed towards the sky, and obviously spoke about Casartelli afterwards. It was quite a moment, really, and that happened here in Limoges.
Also in Limoges, 2000, I think it was. I'll credit Ed Pickering, the editor of Pro Cycling magazine, a very good friend of ours, for this particular bit of trivia. But Limoges was the last time a solo break succeeded in the Tour de France, I gather. Christophe Agneluto, French rider with an Italian name. He was riding for if it wasn't AG2R at the time, it was Casino, but it was the same organisation, Vincent Lavenue's team. And I can remember standing by the side of the road, and it was on about 3k from the finish. There was a big sweeping downhill and a rise up to the top, and solo victories did seem to happen a lot more in the olden days, and 2000 I suppose is now the olden days, but we haven't seen a successful solo break for 16 years now. I wonder if we'll get one in this tour. But before we wrap up on Limoges, just a quick word on Orica Green Edge, because we've been mentioning a couple of times how well teams have been working with 2s and 3s of their riders to pull off successful results. Even, sort of, as I've mentioned, Bora Argon putting 2 riders in breakaways a couple of times. Orica Green Edge really haven't got their act together in this tour yet, and after the finish most of the team were all gathered together, and the atmosphere was really quite bleak. Nobody smiling at all. Michael Matthews in particular looked gutted, leaning over the front of his bike, staring into space. Brian Nygaard, the team's press communications manager, pretty much ushered us away from trying to approach Matthews. The mood looked pretty foul, and I gather that they're just not working very well together. Simon Gerrans, of course, is another rider who you would have thought would be perfectly suited for that kind of finish. Michael Matthews also perfectly suited for that kind of finish, and they finished 10th and 14th. Gerrans 10th, Matthews 14th. And Sean Kelly always says, if you've got 2 riders who are in those sorts of positions, really you should have one of them who's further up. They should work together to put all of their eggs in one basket rather than having 2 people trying to sprint for the win.
When did you say that last solo win was?
2000.
Did Sylvain Calzati not win a solo victory in 2006?
That is a very good question. You'll have to ask Ed. I'm just passing it on from...
I'm looking it up. I'm pretty sure Sylvain Calzati's win in 2006 was a solo win. It was a solo win.
You're right.
But how do you define a solo win? I mean, Lance Armstrong won a solo win, but he attacked a group with 20 kilometres to go. I suppose a solo...
Calzati attacked a group, didn't he?
He did attack he went with 30 kilometres to go.
Okay. Well, Agneluto was out there all day. He was the lone breakaway who was out there for most of the stage. So I suppose we'll let that one go.
All right. Are we about to finish today? Do we have anything else to say? Oh, we've got a little chat with Sam Bennett. I wanted to go and see Sam Bennett because he is having a torrid time. He crashed heavily on the first day, and he's got a real problem with his hand. His hand's very painful, but he's just very stiff. I mean, he was chatting to his agent, Andrew McQuaid, who, as he finished the conversation, sort of tapped him lightly on the shoulder, and Bennett winced. So that was great work by Andrew McQuaid. Sorry, Andrew. He is second last overall. Michael Morku, the Danish rider we were given lessons in pronunciation.
A Danish listener got in touch with the correct pronunciation. Morkov in English, or Morkov, Morku apparently in Danish. Apologies again if I've got that wrong in trying to get it right, getting it even more wrong. But the Katusha rider for the Danish rider. No
one abandoned yet, but Morku is 198th, and Sam Bennett is 197th in the battle for the Lanterne Rouge. So let's have a little chat. Let's hear from Sam Bennett, rather. I spoke to him briefly at the finish. Poor old Sam Bennett had a terrible time last year trying to finish the tour and didn't in the end, and here he is this year. You're looking stiff there. How are you feeling?
I don't know. I'm okay. It's just hard, but hopefully day by day it'll get better.
Do you feel that you are sort of slowly improving? Are you able to rest at night and recover a little bit?
I'm definitely sleeping at night, but I think I'm getting better. I hope I am. Just try to look after myself as best as possible, and hopefully I'll make it the first rest day, and then maybe after that see how the body is.
It must be really frustrating. You know, the form that you came to the tour with, these sort of finishes would suit you down to the ground, wouldn't they?
I'd like to think they would, but I really haven't shown much this year, and I really wanted to do something here, and I just have to just keep going and try and get something out of it anyway.
You had such a struggle last year in the tour. I'm sure you're not thinking too much about that or feeling sorry for yourself, but do you think that this race is cursed for you?
No, I don't know, a bit of bad luck, but hopefully I'll finish it this year and learn from it.
So that was Sam Bennett putting a very brave face on things and even managing a little laugh there at the end.
Well, we should probably move on to our hotel. We're staying in Saint Leonard de Noblat this evening, which is the hometown of Raymond Poulidor, the eternal
He
second.
was on the podium tonight.
On the podium, in his 80s, still here every day, isn't he? On the tour, wearing a
First time
credit.
he's been on the podium.
And they make him wear they make him wear a yellow Credit Lyonnais polo shirt every day, don't they?
He never wore a yellow jersey.
He never wore the yellow jersey,
in the
despite
tour.
being on the podium umpteen times.
Being professional for 38 years.
Yeah. But just before we go, I look ahead to tomorrow, first kind of climbing stage. And before he shot off to do his work, Dan Hackenberg made the very good point that the overall is so close and the finish is so hilly. It could suit any number of riders who are up there at the moment. And you look at, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Sagan could keep the yellow jersey, but lurking just behind Julian Alaphilippe, Alejandro Valverde, Warren Barguil, Chris Froome, Roman Kreuziger, Nairo Quintana, Fabio Aru. The list goes on.
Joaquin
Everybody.
Rodriguez.
Yeah, Joaquin Rodriguez.
Tom Dumoulin.
Dan Martin's on the same time.
But there's, Sergio Henao, Adam Yates. Any of these guys could be in yellow. I think Alaphilippe is a rider that a lot of people fancy for it. I think Warren Barguil has looked extremely good, and Pierre Rolland has been up there. Those two Frenchmen have looked really good. There's something when you're standing at the finish and you see guys coming across, even on a flat day like this, you spot the guys that are at the head every day. You just see them, and obviously Froome and Quintana have been there, but I've noticed Rolland and Barguil. I don't know why. I've been looking out for them maybe for Kilometre Zero that I'm working on, but I have been spotting those guys, and they look good, and they're finishing up there, and that's usually a sign of good form.
A very good indicator of form. Alaphilippe as well, but Barguil was so well placed on the opening day, wasn't he? Very surprisingly so, and then good again on the second day, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Making hay while the sun is shining, and making sure that you don't slip back and lose needless amounts of time, like Nibali 28th overall and 29 seconds off Sagan. I know it's not the same gap to Froome, it's only 11 seconds off Froome, but already just a little bit to make up.
Right, we should go. A reminder that if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review on iTunes. A few of you have done since I put out a plea the other night. We're still top of the sports charts on iTunes.
While we're just plugging things, tomorrow morning Kilometre Zero continues with an episode I've put together on the sports directors, what they do, how they work, the do's and don'ts, goods and bad.
Good. Right, we should leave it there. Thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard.